The galactic hegemony had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They were not kind rulers. They believed that young species were dangerous. Young species asked too many questions. Young species grew too fast. Young species might one day become threats. So the hegemony had a simple solution. They watched young worlds. They studied young species. And when those species became too clever, too curious, too dangerous, the hegemony sent their fleets. The cleansing was always quick. The cleansing was always complete. 47 species had already been erased from existence. Their cities turned to ash. Their histories forgotten. Their songs silenced forever. Earth was next on the list. Admiral stood on the command bridge of the Eternal Silence, the largest warship in the Third Cleansing Fleet. He was old by his species standards. He had overseen 11 cleansings in his career. He felt nothing anymore when he gave the orders. It was simply his job, like a farmer pulling weeds from a garden. "Report," he said, his voice flat and cold. His second officer, a younger named, pulled up the data on the main screen. A blue and green planet appeared, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. It looked peaceful, beautiful, even. Admiral had learned long ago that beautiful planets often held the most dangerous species. Earth, Admiral, third planet from their star, population approximately 8 billion. They have achieved basic space travel. They have nuclear weapons. They have begun experimenting with artificial intelligence. Nodded slowly, threat assessment. Currently minimal, but projections show they could become a galactic-level threat within 300 years if left unchecked. Then we will not leave them unchecked. Turned to his weapons officer. Standard cleansing protocol. Target their major population centers first. I want this finished before the next meal cycle. The weapons officer began entering commands. 17 massive warships moved into formation around Earth. Their weapons powered up, glowing with enough energy to crack continents. On the planet below, 8 billion humans had no idea that death was coming for them. But not everyone was blind to the threat. Deep beneath the mountains of Province in Korea, there was a bunker that did not officially exist. It appeared on no maps. It was listed in no government records. The people who worked there had been erased from all databases. To the world, they did not exist. Director had run this facility for 30 years. She was 62 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. But those tired eyes were sharp as knives as she stared at the screens in front of her. 17 signatures, she said quietly, just outside the orbit of Neptune, moving toward us at impossible speeds. Her aide, a young man named, stood beside her. His hands were shaking. He was only 28. He had joined this department because he thought it would be easy work, watching the skies for threats that would never come. A boring job, a safe job. Now he understood why Director never smiled. "They're not responding to any of our signals," said, his voice cracked. "Radio, laser, quantum pulse, nothing. They're ignoring us completely." Nodded, she had expected this. For 30 years she had tried to warn the world's governments. Aliens existed. They were watching, and they were not friendly. Everyone had laughed at her. They called her paranoid. They cut her funding year after year. They told her to stop wasting resources on fairy tales. Nobody was laughing now. "How long until they reach Earth?" she asked. Checked his calculations 3 times before answering. At their current speed, 14 hours. 14 hours. In 14 hours, everything would change. In 14 hours, humanity would either survive or join the 47 species that had been erased before them. Walked to a small safe in the corner of the room. She entered a code that only she knew. The safe opened, revealing a single red phone. This phone was connected to 17 other facilities around the world. Facilities that, like this one, did not officially exist. She picked up the phone. "This is Director," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who had prepared for this moment for 3 decades. "Authorization code, Omega 77. This is Directive 0. I repeat, this is Directive 0. On the other end of the line, she heard gasps. She heard whispers. She heard someone begin to cry. Wake the architects said, "It's time." She hung up the phone and turned back to the screens. The 17 red dots were still moving toward Earth, moving toward 8 billion people who had no idea what was coming. Stared at her. "Director, what is Directive 0? What are the architects?" Was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. 30 years ago we found something, buried deep beneath the ice of Antarctica. At first we thought it was just rock, strange rock but still rock. Then we realized it was artificial, built, created by something that was not human. His eyes went wide. Aliens. No, something older, much, much older. The structure beneath Antarctica is 65 million years old. It was placed there before the dinosaurs died, before humans existed, before our ancestors had even climbed down from the trees. Pointed at the screens, at the blue and green planet that was about to face extinction. Someone knew this day would come. Someone knew that species like us would eventually face species like them. She gestured toward the approaching fleet, and someone decided to give us a chance. What kind of chance? Smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had carried a terrible secret for far too long. The kind of chance that will either save us or destroy us. There is no middle ground, no second attempt. We activate the architect technology and everything changes. Forever. In orbit, Admiral watched his fleet move into position. The cleansing would begin soon. Another young species would be erased. Another potential threat would be eliminated. He felt nothing. This was simply how the galaxy worked. The strong survived. The weak were removed. It had always been this way. It would always be this way. But as he stared at the blue planet below, Admiral felt something strange. A flicker of unease. A tiny voice in the back of his mind whispering that something was wrong. He ignored it. That was his first mistake. The world learned about the invasion at exactly 3:47 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. The hegemony did not bother with secrecy. Why would they? They had done this 47 times before. They knew how it ended. They always knew how it ended. Their message blasted across every radio frequency, every television channel, every phone and computer on the planet. The words were translated perfectly into every human language. The technology behind this translation was beyond anything humans had ever created. The message was simple: submit to cleansing. Resistance is biological error. You have been judged. You have been found wanting. Your species ends today. Panic spread across Earth like wildfire. In New York, people ran screaming through the streets. In Tokyo, traffic stopped completely as drivers abandoned their cars. In London, churches filled with people praying for salvation that would not come. In Mumbai, families held each other and wept. Governments tried to respond. Military forces around the world activated. Missiles were armed. Jets took to the skies. But everyone knew it was pointless. Everyone had seen the size of those ships on the news. Earth's entire military might could not scratch the paint on one of those vessels. Humanity was going to die. Everyone knew it. Everyone felt it in their bones. But not everyone had given up. In Antarctica, in a facility buried beneath 3 kilometers of ice, engineer was running. She was 34 years old, with short black hair and grease-stained hands. She had worked in this facility for 6 years. She had helped build machines she did not understand. She had assembled components that should not exist according to any physics textbook she had ever read. She had never asked questions. That was the rule: do your work. Don't ask questions. Trust that someone somewhere knew what they were building. Now, as alarms screamed and red lights flashed, finally understood. Final component ready for insertion, she shouted into her radio. Bay 7 is go. Around her, hundreds of other engineers and scientists worked frantically. They had 14 hours when the alert came. They had used every single minute. Now, with less than an hour before the alien fleet reached weapons range, they were almost ready. Almost. Director's voice crackled through the facility's speakers. She sounded calm, almost peaceful, the voice of someone who had already accepted whatever was about to happen. All personnel, this is Director. The final component is being inserted now. Once activation begins, there is no going back. I want to thank each and every one of you. Whatever happens next, know that you have given humanity its only chance. Watched as a massive crystalline structure was lowered into place by Crane. It was beautiful in a strange way. The crystal seemed to glow from within, shifting between colors that could not name. Colors that human eyes were never meant to see. The crystal clicked into place. For a moment nothing happened, held her breath. Around her everyone held their breath. The entire facility went silent. Then the ground began to shake. In orbit, Admiral frowned at his display. Something was wrong. Energy readings on the planet below were spiking, not in one location, in 17 locations spread across the planet's surface. What is happening? He demanded. Analysis. His science officer worked frantically at his console. I don't understand, Admiral. The energy signatures. They're connecting, forming some kind of network. A weapon. I don't know. The patterns don't match anything in our databases. The science officer's voice was shaking now. Admiral, these structures they're activating. They predate human civilization. They predate human evolution. These structures are 65 million years old. Felt ice form in his stomach. 65 million years. That was older than his own species, older than the hegemony itself. What had been sleeping on this planet? On Earth, pillars of light erupted from 17 locations around the world. Antarctica, the Sahara Desert, the Pacific Ocean, the Himalayas, the Amazon rainforest. 17 pillars of pure, brilliant light shooting up into the sky like the fingers of a god reaching toward the stars. The pillars connected. They wove together above the atmosphere, forming a lattice of light that wrapped around the entire planet. From space, Earth looked like it was being cradled in a web of pure energy. Pilot was flying his fighter jet over the Yellow Sea when the light show began. He was 29 years old, one of the best pilots in the Korean Air Force. He had scrambled when the invasion alert came, knowing it was suicide, knowing it was pointless, but refusing to die on the ground like a coward. Now he watched the impossible light show through his canopy, and he felt something he had not felt since he was a child. Wonder. His radio crackled. Commander's voice. All aircraft, this is Central Command. New orders. We are not fighting to win. We are fighting to buy time. Keyed his radio. Buy time for what, Commander? Before could answer, something else happened. A sound. But not a sound you heard with your ears. A sound you felt in your chest, in your bones, in the very core of your being. A voice that was somehow ancient and somehow familiar. A voice that spoke directly to the soul of every human being on Earth. Children of Earth, your inheritance is ready. Will you claim it? In her bunker, Director closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had waited 30 years for this moment. 30 years of being laughed at. 30 years of being called crazy. 30 years of knowing something terrible was coming and being unable to make anyone believe her. Now finally, the waiting was over. Yes, she whispered, we claim it. The lattice of light around Earth pulsed once, twice, 3 times, and then it began to sink into the planet's surface, into the oceans, into the mountains, into the very bones of the Earth. Admiral watched in growing horror as the planet below him began to change. Energy readings were off the charts. His sensors could no longer make sense of what they were seeing. All ships, he screamed. Open fire, destroy that planet now. 17 warships unleashed their weapons at once. Beams of energy powerful enough to crack moons streaked toward the small blue planet. The beams hit the atmosphere and stopped. They did not explode. They did not dissipate. They simply stopped, frozen in place as if the universe itself had pressed a pause button. Then slowly the energy began to change, to transform, to become something else. In the Antarctic facility, Engineer watched her screens fill with data she could not understand. The alien weapons were not being blocked. They were being absorbed, fed into systems that were waking up after millions of years of sleep. "They're giving us power," she breathed. "Their own weapons are giving us power." Director's voice came through the speakers one final time. "All personnel, brace yourselves. The architects are waking up, and they have been waiting a very, very long time." The entire planet began to glow. Admiral had seen many things in his long career. He had watched planets burn. He had seen species beg for mercy that would never come. He had overseen the death of billions without feeling anything at all. But he had never seen anything like this. The blue planet below him was changing. Not slowly, the way planets changed over millions of years. Not gradually, the way civilizations built themselves up over centuries. Earth was changing right now, right before his eyes, transforming into something his mind could not fully understand. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Someone tell me what is happening." His bridge crew had no answers. They stared at their screens with wide eyes and trembling hands. The data made no sense. Energy readings that should have been impossible, structures appearing from nowhere, matter being created from pure information. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had studied every known species. They had every known technology. They had believed they understood the universe. They were wrong. On Earth, knowledge was flooding into human minds. Not slowly, the way children learn in school. Not carefully, the way scientists build understanding over lifetimes of study. This knowledge came all at once, like a dam breaking, like a flood sweeping away everything in its path. In Seoul, analysts sat at her desk and suddenly understood things she had never learned. Quantum mechanics, faster-than-light travel, energy manipulation on scales that made nuclear weapons look like children's toys. The information poured into her brain, and somehow, impossibly, her brain could handle it. She began to laugh, then she began to cry, then she did both at the same time. "They seeded us," she said to no one in particular. "Someone seeded this planet. They left everything we would ever need just waiting for the right moment, waiting for us to be ready." All across Earth, the same thing was happening. Engineers suddenly understood how to build ships that could cross galaxies. Scientists suddenly understood physics that had never been discovered. Soldiers suddenly understood weapons that could unmake stars. And everyone, everywhere, understood one terrible truth. Earth was not unique. Humanity was not an accident. They were part of a plan that had been set in motion 65 million years ago, by beings so advanced that even their leftover technology was beyond anything the hegemony had ever imagined. In her bunker, Director stood at the center of a chamber that was filling with light. Holographic displays surrounded her, showing information in languages that had not existed until 5 minutes ago. Information about ships, about weapons, about shields that could protect entire worlds. And about the architects. "They knew," whispered, reading the data as fast as her enhanced mind could process it. "They knew the hegemony would rise. They knew species like them would try to destroy everyone else. So they planted seeds. Thousands of seeds on thousands of worlds, all waiting for the day when they would be needed." Ma'am stood beside her, his eyes wide with wonder and fear. "What are the architects? Where did they come from?" Shook her head slowly. "The data doesn't say. They disappeared long before the hegemony even existed. Maybe they died out. Maybe they moved on to another dimension. Maybe they're still out there, watching, waiting to see what we do with their gift. She turned to face him. Her eyes were glowing faintly, lit from within by energy that was not entirely human anymore. What matters is what they left behind. They left us everything we need to survive, to fight back, to win. And then what? Asked quietly. Was silent for a long moment. That was the question, wasn't it? The architects had given humanity the power to destroy the hegemony, but what would humanity do with that power? Would they become just as bad as the aliens who had tried to exterminate them? She did not have an answer, not yet. In orbit, the first human ships were appearing. Admiral watched in absolute horror as vessels materialized out of nothing. Not built, not constructed, simply appearing as if reality itself was being rewritten to include them. Each ship was massive, larger than his flagship, covered in designs that made his eyes hurt to look at. And there were hundreds of them, with more appearing every second. Admiral's voice was high with panic. "We need to retreat. We need to fall back to the jump point." Did not respond. He could not respond. His mind had simply stopped working, overwhelmed by the impossible sight before him. On the bridge of the first ship to achieve full consciousness, Captain took his first breath as a new kind of being. He was still human, but he was also something more now, connected to the ship beneath him, connected to the other awakened humans, connected to a network of knowledge and power that stretched back 65 million years. He was 34 years old. He had been a naval officer commanding a small patrol boat in the East Sea. That had been 2 hours ago. Now he stood on the bridge of a vessel that could devastate solar systems. The responsibility was terrifying. The power was intoxicating. Forced himself to breathe, to focus, to remember who he was. "Director," he said through the quantum link that now connected all awakened humans, "the fleet is ready. What are your orders?" His response came instantly, her voice calm and clear. "Disable the hegemony fleet. No deaths unless absolutely necessary." Paused. "Ma'am, they were going to kill us. 8 billion people. They were going to kill everyone." "I know," replied. "That is exactly why we must not do the same to them." Lieutenant, standing at the tactical console, frowned. She was 26, the youngest person on the bridge. Her newfound knowledge told her exactly how easy it would be to destroy the alien fleet. One command, one thought, and they would all be dead. "Why show mercy?" she asked. "They never showed mercy to anyone else." His voice came through the link, and this time it carried weight. Not authority, not command, something deeper. Sadness, perhaps, or wisdom. "Because if we become like them, then they have already won. The architects gave us this power to stop the killing, not to continue it, not to become the next hegemony, to end the cycle. Forever." Closed his eyes. He thought about his family his mother, who was probably terrified right now, his little sister, who had always believed in aliens. He thought about all 8 billion people on Earth, all waiting to see what would happen next. Then he opened his eyes. "All ships," he said, "disable the hegemony fleet. No casualties. Show them what humanity chooses to do with power." The awakened fleet moved. 93 seconds later, every single hegemony warship was floating dead in space. Their weapons were gone. Their engines were gone. Their shields were gone. But their life support was still functioning. Their crews were still alive. Admiral sat on his command throne, surrounded by darkness and silence. His ship was dead. His fleet was dead. But he was alive. His crew was alive. He did not understand why. A human ship pulled alongside the eternal silence. A voice spoke directly into his mind, calm and clear and impossibly human. "Admiral, we need to talk about what comes next." The pulse traveled at speeds that should have been impossible. It moved through normal space and through hyperspace and through dimensions that had no names. It reached every corner of the galaxy in less than an hour. Every species that had the technology to detect such things felt it. and every species understood its meaning. On the hegemony, High Chancellor stood in her chambers and watched her displays fill with impossible data. The third cleansing fleet was gone, not destroyed, disabled, every ship floating dead in space with their crews still alive. That was not how cleansings worked. That was not how the galaxy worked. The strong destroyed the weak. The powerful eliminated the powerless. That was the natural order. That was the only order. But now something had changed. The pulse carried a message. It was written in mathematics so basic that even species with no common language could understand it. Even species that had never met each other. Even species that had hidden in the darkest corners of space, praying they would never be found. The sleepers have awakened. The harvest ends now. Across the galaxy, reactions varied. On slave worlds controlled by the hegemony, beings who had known nothing but chains looked up at the sky with hope they had not felt in generations. On worlds that had hidden from the hegemony's gaze, scientists scrambled to understand what had happened. On worlds that had fought the hegemony and lost, survivors wept for those who had not lived to see this day. And on the hegemony, High Chancellor felt something she had never felt before: fear. Real fear, the kind that made your hands shake, the kind that made your thoughts scatter, the kind that reminded you that you were small and weak and mortal, no matter how much power you had gathered. She reached for her communications console. She needed to contact the other chancellors. She needed to organize a response. She needed to do something. But before she could touch the console, a hologram appeared in front of her. A human. A small, tired-looking human with gray hair and calm eyes. "High Chancellor," Director said, "my name is, I represent Earth and the awakened human race. We need to talk." Tried to speak. Her voice would not come. She tried again. How are you doing this? This is a secured channel, the most secured channel in the hegemony." Smiled slightly. It was not a cruel smile. It was almost sad. "High Chancellor, the technology we have inherited is beyond anything the hegemony has ever encountered. Your secured channels are open to us. Your hidden fleets are visible to us. Your secret weapons are known to us." She paused, letting that sink in. "We could destroy you, every ship, every world, every member of your species. We have the power to do what you have done to 47 other species. We could erase you from existence and no one in the galaxy could stop us." Hearts were pounding, both of them racing faster than they had ever raced before. This was the end. This was how her species would die. They had finally met something stronger than themselves, and now they would pay the price. But continued, "We will not do that." Blinked what? "We will not destroy you. We will not exterminate your species. We will not do to you what you have done to others." "But why? We tried to kill you. We have killed so many others." "Yes, you have." His voice was heavy with sorrow. 47 species, billions of intelligent beings, cultures and histories and songs that will never be heard again. You have committed crimes beyond counting, beyond forgiveness. She stepped closer to the holographic projection, and somehow her eyes seemed to look directly into soul. "But we refuse to become you. We refuse to let your crimes justify more crimes. We refuse to let the cycle of violence continue." In orbit around Earth, Admiral sat in a small room aboard the human ship was strange, beautiful in a way his mind could not quite process. The walls seemed to be made of light and crystal and something that might have been alive. Across from him sat Captain, a human, a being that by all rights should have been dead, should have been exterminated like the others. Instead, he was offering a cup of something warm that smelled faintly of flowers. "It's tea," said, "a traditional drink from my home region. You don't have to drink it if you don't want to." Stared at the cup. He had overseen the deaths of billions. He had given orders that had ended entire civilizations. And now this human was offering him tea. "Why?" asked. His voice was hoarse. Why are you being kind to me? You know what I am, what I have done." Was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window at the stars, at the blue planet hanging in the darkness below. "My grandmother used to tell me stories," he said finally. "Stories about monsters and heroes. In those stories, the heroes always had a choice. They could become monsters themselves to defeat the monsters, or they could stay true to who they were even when it was hard, even when it would have been easier to just let go." He turned back to, "You gave orders to kill 8 billion people. Children, artists, farmers, teachers, people who had never hurt anyone in their lives. You would have killed them all without a second thought." Flinched, but's voice was not angry, it was sad. "I could hate you for that, I could kill you for that. Many of my people want exactly that. They want revenge. They want justice. They want to make you feel what we felt when we saw your ships in our sky. So why don't you?" Picked up his own cup of tea and took a slow sip before answering. "Because my grandmother also taught me something else. She said that the true measure of a person is not how they treat their friends. It is how they treat their enemies. Anyone can be kind to people they love. It takes something special to be kind to people who have hurt you." He set down his cup. "I do not forgive you, Admiral. I cannot forgive you. What you have done is unforgivable. But I can choose not to continue the cycle. I can choose to be better than what was done to us." Felt something wet on his face. He reached up and touched his cheek, tears. He had not cried since he was a child. He had thought he had forgotten how. "I do not understand," he whispered. "This is not how the galaxy works. The strong destroy the weak. That is the only law." Stood up and walked to the window. The stars reflected in his eyes, millions of points of light, each one a sun, each one perhaps warming planets with beings who were watching and waiting. "Perhaps that was the only law," he said. "But we are writing new laws now, and the first law is this: the killing stops here, today, forever." He turned to face the Admiral one final time. "You have a choice, Admiral. You can spend the rest of your life hating us, hating yourself, drowning in the guilt of what you have done. Or you can help us build something new, something better. The choice is yours." Looked down at the cup of tea in his hands. It was still warm, such a small thing, such a human thing. He raised it to his lips and drank. It tasted like hope. The broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy, every ship, every station, every planet, every being with the technology to receive a signal. Director's face appeared on screens and holographic displays and neural interfaces across 10,000 light years. She looked tired. Her gray hair was messy. Her clothes were wrinkled. She looked exactly like what she was, a 62-year-old woman who had not slept in 3 days, a woman who had carried an impossible burden for 30 years, a woman who was about to speak to trillions of beings she had never met. She looked human. "Peoples of the galaxy," she began. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who had practiced this speech 1,000 times in her mind. "My name is, I speak for Earth and for the awakened human race." Across the galaxy, billions of beings stopped what they were doing. Soldiers paused mid-march. Workers set down their tools. Children stopped playing. Everyone watched. Everyone listened. You have just witnessed the activation of architect technology that has been hidden in our world for 65 million years. This technology has made us, overnight, the most powerful civilization in the known universe. On slave worlds, beings began to whisper. On hidden worlds, beings began to hope. On hegemony worlds, beings began to fear. "We did not ask for this power," continued. "We did not earn it through conquest or cruelty. It was given to us as a gift by beings who disappeared long before our species existed. The architects saw darkness coming. They saw species like the hegemony rising, and they decided to plant seeds of light throughout the cosmos." She paused, took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was harder, sharper. "The galactic hegemony has exterminated 47 sentient species. 47 unique ways of seeing the universe, 47 irreplaceable perspectives on existence, cultures destroyed, histories erased, songs silenced forever. Her eyes seemed to burn with something between grief and determination. This ends now. On the hegemony, High Chancellor watched with her hearts in her throat. Around her, her advisors were panicking. Some were calling for immediate surrender. Others were calling for a final, suicidal attack. Others were simply frozen, unable to process what was happening. Raised a hand for silence. She wanted to hear what the human would say next. "But we will not become what we have defeated," said. "We are not conquerors. We are not executioners. We are gardeners now, inheriting a duty we never asked for and never wanted." She straightened her shoulders. The hegemony's leaders will face justice, not extinction, justice. They will answer for their crimes, but the hegemony's peoples will be given a choice, not an ultimatum, not a threat, a choice. Lieutenant stood on the bridge of watching the broadcast along with everyone else. She thought about her brother, who had died in a training accident 3 years ago. She thought about her parents, who were probably watching this broadcast in their apartment inn. She thought about all the people she had loved and lost and wanted to protect. Part of her still wanted revenge. Part of her still wanted the hegemony to suffer the way they had made others suffer. But another part of her, a bigger part, felt something she had not expected: hope. "In exactly 1 standard hour," Director announced, "we will activate the full architect network, every hidden node, every sleeping guardian, every seeded world across the galaxy." She took a deep breath. The galaxy will go dark. For exactly 60 seconds, every star, every power grid, every light source will be dimmed as the new systems come online. Do not be afraid. This is not an attack. This is a beginning. Admiral watched from the observation deck of the captain stood beside him, silent and watchful. They had been talking for hours now, had told the human everything, every cleansing, every species, every crime, had listened without judgment, without hatred, without the disgust would have expected. "When the lights return," continued, "you will find that certain things have changed. Weapons capable of destroying planets will no longer function. Slave collars will no longer activate. Torture devices will fail. Systems designed for cruelty and death will simply stop." On 1,000 slave worlds, beings began to weep, some with hope, some with disbelief, some with both. "We are not gods," said. Her voice softened, became almost gentle. "We are not saviors. We are just a species that got very lucky and very powerful at the same time. We are going to make mistakes. We are going to need help." She looked directly into the camera, directly into the eyes of every being watching across the galaxy. "We are going to need all of you, every species, every perspective, every voice that the hegemony tried to silence. We need you to help us figure out what comes next. We cannot build a new galaxy alone. We need partners, we need friends, we need teachers." High Chancellor felt tears streaming down her face. When had she started crying? She did not know, but she could not stop. "The old galaxy was ruled by fear," said. "Species feared the hegemony. The hegemony feared young species. Everyone feared everyone else. Fear led to violence. Violence led to death. Death led to more fear." She shook her head slowly. "We are breaking that cycle today, right now. The new galaxy will be built on something else. We do not know exactly what yet, but we know what it will not be. It will not be fear. It will not be violence. It will not be the strong crushing the weak." She smiled. It was a small smile, tired but genuine. "We will figure it out together. That is the only promise I can make. We will figure it out together." Nodded once. "Activation in 60 seconds. See you on the other side." The broadcast ended. Engineer sat in the Antarctic facility, surrounded by machines she had built but still did not fully understand. In 60 seconds, those machines would change everything. They would wake guardians that had slept for millions of years. They would activate networks that spanned the entire galaxy. They would end one era and begin another. She was terrified. She was excited. She did not know if what was coming would be good or bad. But she knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same. The countdown began. 60, 50, 40. Across the galaxy, beings watched and waited, holding their breath, holding each other, holding on to hope. 30, 20, 10. Director closed her eyes. She thought about her parents, who had died never knowing what she had been working on. She thought about all the years of loneliness and doubt. She thought about the 47 species that had been lost. She whispered, "This is for you, all of you, the ones we could not save." 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The galaxy went dark. For 60 seconds, every star seemed to dim. Every light source flickered and faded. Every screen went black. Every being in the universe existed in perfect darkness, connected only by the beating of their hearts and the knowledge that they were not alone. In that darkness, something ancient stirred, something that had been sleeping since before life on Earth had crawled from the seas, something that had been waiting for this exact moment. The Architect Network came fully online. And when the lights returned, everything had changed. On slave worlds, chains fell away. On warships, weapons went silent. On torture chambers, machines stopped forever. The tools of cruelty and death simply ceased to function, as if they had never existed at all. Admiral stood at the observation window and watched as the stars returned. They seemed brighter now, or maybe that was just his imagination. Maybe it was just hope. Captain placed a hand on his shoulder. "Welcome to the new galaxy, Admiral." Did not know what to say. He did not know how to feel. For the first time in his long, terrible life, the future was uncertain, terrifying, unknown. But also somehow beautiful. He thought about the tea the human had given him, about the kindness he had not deserved, about the mercy he had never shown others. He had a choice now. He could spend the rest of his life in darkness, or he could try somehow to help build something better. It would not be easy. Nothing worth doing ever was. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Admiral wanted to try. Below, the blue and green planet called Earth continued to spin. 8 billion humans continued to live, to breathe, to dream. They had been given an impossible gift. They had been given an impossible responsibility. And somewhere out there, in the vast darkness between the stars, the architects watched and waited to see what their children would do. The killing had stopped. Now the real work could begin.